Hello and welcome to the final episode of History Makers, the series which has gone behind the scenes of the 1992 Premiership season. On this last episode, Michael Brennan, Dwayne Lamb, Ashley McIntosh and Chris Muddy Waterman. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in. What was the last few days like, the celebrations and getting back around the boys?
Well, it's good to be here, that's for sure.
Survived.
Have a break. Yeah, no, we're all still here. No, it's been great fun.
It was great. Everyone came. A few of the boys made an effort from over east, so it was good to catch up with them. And unfortunately, we missed our skipper, John Worsfold.
Yeah, went down. What about you guys? Did you enjoy getting back around the team and reliving the 92?
Yeah, it was great to catch up. Having 3 days is probably a little bit overkill. We probably could have knocked it off in 1 or 2, I would have thought. But I wasn't as keen on that third day. I'll put it that way.
I think the boys have got a little bit more conservative, and with the 3 days, they probably thought, the next day will be the bigger one. So went a bit easy, but being the elder statesman, I always seem to sneak away at a reasonable hour. I had some bad habits when I was young.
On the Saturday, Muddy, Jake played a great game. What's it like just seeing your son? You had success here at the club, and now your son, who played a really good game on the weekend as well.
Yeah, it's great to watch. Actually, quite a few people asked me at the weekend because we've got the other one on the other side of the country now too. So it's a bit of a buzz, but has its moments. I mean, certainly wasn't any social media around in our day, thank God, but there's a lot of that now, and the boys cop a lot of scrutiny from particularly their own members, which is disappointing. And they've been through a horrid time, and we've sort of sat there and watched it all. So who's been part of the team up and down and lost confidence? But I suspect on the weekend that with a couple of ins, they were going to be all right, and they were pretty good. And I thought his job on Stewart was pretty good. And
it was actually great for us as Muddy's teammates, seeing Jake out there, and we were all up and about, and he played really well, so it was excellent.
And you've also had an experience being, the father of a boy who's played at the club.
Yeah. So on the serious side that Muddy was talking about, the expectation is there, and I think they come under a bit more scrutiny than the rest of the squad members, but that's life.
This modern day football environment, is it completely different to back in 92?
I think absolutely. In some ways, I'd love to go out and have a crack and play now just to see how it feels, because it's...
That's because you love the coin, mate.
Oh, well, I never got it back then, so that $2 I mentioned, I've still got that. It's still accruing, a little bit of interest, but at the end of the day, yes, it's a totally different game. And I sort of presented Greg Clark's jumper a few weeks ago, and I said to the boys, they get caught in between. It's a tough time at the moment, and sometimes they look like they don't know what they're doing, or they're disinterested. And I think it's just such a confusing game because it's not one-on-one like it was back in our day, where we had a job to do and would beat our player, and then if Millie beats his player and Monk does, and then the back line's up and going, we're half a chance. But now you don't know what their roles are, so you, like Muddy's boys, sort of been on Stewart to limit him, but defensive half forward, but got his couple of goals and hurts him there. So they've all got a role and they've got to stick to it, but it's hard to know sometimes what they're doing.
Ash, what do you think about the modern game? You played on some amazing forwards back in the day, and probably more incredible big full forwards back then than there are now. What do you make of the modern game? Yeah,
it certainly lacks the one-on-one contest. We just watched it on the weekend and just said, just sort of watch this thing, and just went from one side of the ground to the other side of the ground, probably ended up in the same spot. But there was no one-on-one contest. And probably until you got down into the forward line, and then there's a Josh Kennedy or a Darling with a one-on-one, which is good, but there's probably not enough of it around the ground, I don't think, Yeah, this group is interesting mix of age and experience coming into the original Eagles side, or the 92 side. But even going back before then, you guys had played in Waffle Grand Finals in 86, and you'd played in that one as well in 86. What was it like going from there to suddenly starting in a new team together?
Monk wouldn't talk to me for a couple of years.
That's right. The Subiaco East Fremantle rivalry was really strong off the back of a couple of Waffle Grand Finals. So then I think there was half a dozen of both those sides in the initial squad. It was awkward. It was a big job for the coach, who Ron Alexander, and to try and blend that group together would have been an enormous task, and I don't think he really got enough credit for what a great job he did do.
It was a wonderful first year, I think, when we went 11 games, and Ron was a wonderful coach, very close to the players, and that was tough. You know, at the end of the day, you're trying to bond and build friendships, but at the same time, you're competing for a spot in the ground. And I remember back in those days, was J.A. back in that first? See, Staver was a Claremont boy, J.A. was a Claremont boy, and I wouldn't say there's waxing going on, but everyone's, you know, looking after mates and everyone wants to get a game. But so, yeah, it's hard, but at the same time, you're trying to bond. But I think the travel aspect, back in those days, it was pretty relaxed. I reckon we got to spend a lot of time together, and it started the
and
relationship.
we got half a dozen guys back from the VFL to join the squad. Dean Turner, Ross Glendenning, and the boys that Lammy mentioned, Phil Narkle as well, and they sort of gave us a really good guide as to what we should expect, that how professional and how tough the game was.
What about when Malthouse arrived? What was that like on the squad and the team, and how did that evolve the playing group?
I don't know. I think Mick came over. He was young. I think he tried to keep a bit of distance, but I remember having, you know, a catch-up dinner with him. I think I went along with Woosh to his home, and so he was inviting in, but he'd been pretty close at Footscray from what I gather, and he wanted to keep a little bit of distance. But I think he was reasonably astute from knowledge of the game, so he knew what he was coming over and what sort of squad he had, whereas I reckon a lot of the other VFL clubs, it was what happened over there happened, and they'd pick the best player from state game, and everyone wanted to get him. But I think he had good knowledge, and I always found him very organised. I reckon he was a good speaker on the day. He'd try to find something else. You know, a lot of them are rah-rah, but His knowledge, for me, especially in the position I played, is his knowledge of the actual grounds that we were playing on, the suburban ovals, was really good. He used to, you know, tee you up in the sense of the wind and, you know, the size of the ground and the attacking side and the defensive side, and he exploited that as far as he could. And for us, I reckon that was really important. And the opposition players. Yeah. Like, he knew them all inside out, whereas I think that was lacking the previous couple of years.
Ash, one for you. From memory, you were a very good athlete, like track athlete, that sort of thing growing up as well. Was footy always going to be on your cards, or did you flirt with potentially another sport at all?
Well, I didn't really think too much about it, put it that way. I just enjoyed playing tennis and doing athletics and footy. But what I did know is that, you know, I got sick of tennis pretty quickly. And after 10 games of playing footy at school, because you only played 10 games for the year, I was just sort of starting to get going. So I knew that I loved the game, and the opportunity came up with the Eagles when Malthouse came over. Actually, I tried to take a photo for the papers, but I didn't have a football in the house. But I had just had foot surgery, so they checked out the X-rays and make sure that I was well on the way to recovery, and they picked us up after that. But I never, had any questions of whether to sign on the dotted line or not. I was keen, and really enjoyed the sport. And
you made an impact very early, obviously. But what was some of the opponents that you really enjoyed playing on? What was an opponent that you really almost feared to play on because they were that good?
Well, I guess I played the week before Glenn Jakovich, actually, which I spoke to him the other night about. He was howling about that. And I started off in the forward line and played half forward. Actually, my first game, Peter Simic did his hamstring against Richmond over at Waverley, and I went into full forward and kicked a couple of goals. So I really started as a forward. But then when a few of the key forwards popped up, and perhaps Monkey was injured, they dropped me back there because they probably thought that I was sort of athletic enough to play on those guys. So I very much turned into from a forward into a forward 1 week, a backline player the next week, and then forward the week after. And then probably after a few injuries in the forward line, because I always seem to get injured when I played in the forward line, they decided to leave me in the back line, which is all good.
They ever thought about putting Summer back and leaving you up forward?
Well, you can't man up. You can't man up. So.
In the modern day, you might be a real swing man where you would have gone back and forth more often. Do you ever think about that at all?
Yeah, I think one thing's for sure, I probably would have had to have been fitter than what I was.
We're all like that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, players like Tony Lockett, virtually never used to get out of the goal square, or certainly not out of the 50-metre line. So the opportunity to run off him nowadays would have been a lot better. But it's just, like these guys are saying, the game has completely changed. I reckon for the worse, personally, but, that's the way it goes.
You're another backman who spent forward. In fact, I think the grand final decade, there's a graphic that showed the grand final decade, Carey and Spalding, all that, and Michael Brennan, centre-half forward.
Premiership centre-half forward.
How many goals?
Yeah, it's a long story, but I was a bit busted up going into the 92 final. I'd done my hamstring against Hawthorn. Also had a few cracked ribs, but that's another story.
Were you fit?
I got a game. Craig Turley and myself both had some injury issues, but as it turned out, because I missed the equivalent of second semi-final back then, and Mick was very much, we'd won by 6 goals. He had his placement in the back line. He had Jacko on Stoneham and etc. I think Geelong went with 2 bigs and 4 smalls. So, yeah, I ended up, took David Hines' spot, which was up at centre forward. Had a small contribution towards the premiership win, but that's how I ended up there.
There's quite a overplayed shot, which I'm sure you don't want to see too often, of the 91 grand final at the end, in which you look quite distraught. In fact, I think you're in tears at the end of that grand final. What were you thinking at the end of the game? It was a huge disappointment.
It was probably a build-up to that, was playing at East Fremantle. I played in the 84 and 86 Waffle losing teams. And 1985, I did my hamstring prior to the grand final and missed the premiership. Then comes 1991 and we lose the AFL premiership to Hawthorn. So I was probably 26, 27 years old at that stage. And I was just starting, really, the emotion was all about, will I ever get that opportunity to win a flag? And adding to that, then 1992, I do my hamstring in the final. So Mick was really good to me, actually, at that time. I remember we were chatting and quite emotional about it after that Hawthorn final. Yeah, so it ended up okay. I ended up with a couple of medals, so I was happy.
Take any spot.
Well, we go into the 1992 season, the pre-season. I want to get your comments from a little clip that Don Pike will play in a second here.
From my memory, it was pretty similar to what it had been the year before. I mean, as I said, we played really strong footy through 91 and as I said, won a lot of games. And then we come back and Mick was Mick. Mick wasn't compromising on anything. He was, it was fair to say that post the grand final, there was some pretty brutal feedback that came, our way and the individual's way. So it was, some guys stewed on that for a while. And when we came back, we just sort of hit training with that purpose of wanting to keep getting better and as I said, go one better as well. And it was probably driven in combination by Mick. And Mick was Mick's a passionate, competitive individual, and so were a lot of the players. So that sort of blended together towards right. Let's now chase getting back there and trying to get our hands on it.
Don Pike's recollection. Now I want to go around the table and see what everyone thinks, because getting to a grand final and backing up and winning the next year is not as common as it used to be. So what was it like in 1992 pre-season?
Don't remember it perfectly, but all I know is that from year to year, things didn't go backwards at training, and he was always on point. Mick, he was as gnarly as ever coming off a losing grand final. So it was always push, but it was not stupid. But we were trained pretty hard, and we just put up with it. And for the first part, Brian Dawson would run all the running side of it, which is good. And Dawson didn't let up at all either. So by this stage, we're trying to get personal bests and 1 and 2 Ks and stuff like that. So we didn't slow down. But at this stage, where particularly in the age group, Ash is coming in and Jacko and Mitch, so they're getting bigger and stronger. And for my age group, which is Summer and Woosher and Bluey, we're getting into 24, 25. We're just hammering the weights to somehow get stronger. And that's what we thought we needed to do, because Hawthorn were a brutal team. And by the time we got to the end of 91, going into 92, there was accusations coming at us from the other side of the country about what we're doing over there, because we're big and strong. So that was still a major focus. And the guy running the weights was unreal. And we just wanted to get bigger and stronger. And so, well, what we did last year was X and Y. We have to do X and Y plus next year, so we have to work harder.
The weights program certainly got accelerated, but also the appetite to do it. Because we realised, playing against Gary Ayres and Dipper Domenico, and a few, like, they're big, strong boys, aren't they? Paul Deere, and we put it to the point where we knew where we had to get to. So there's a lot of hard work done, like a massive amount of hard work. But I think certainly from people like Dwayne and myself who are becoming the senior members of the group, what we were trying to do also was to encourage Ash, Glenn Jakovich, Mitch and the younger crew, Dean Kemp, Brett Heddy, that these opportunities don't come around all the time, so let's try and grab it.
Was that your recollection as a senior leader at that time as well?
Being the oldest, I think dementia's starting to kick in, so my memory's not wonderful. But yeah, I think after 91, I probably had similar at Sue with 85, 86. I think you said it doesn't happen as often, but yeah, it's a terrible feeling. You'd rather not be there at all, nearly in some ways on losing a grand final. So I think we went away, and I think it was a strong group, and yeah, with the talent that was coming through in another year, and I think it was a determined crew. So all of them were quite driven. So it was, it went back to hard work and with that memory in the back, and yeah, I think Mick steered us well, and you need to touch your luck and all the way through. But yeah, I think that was the way it all sort of unfolded.
The other thing that was important, I think we probably turned into a little bit more professional, as in job-wise. There was people working until 5 o'clock. In 91, I worked until 5 o'clock pretty much every day, and probably had to get off work half an hour early just to make training time. And I'd race onto the field, unstrapped, without doing my warm-up, and just sort of jumped into training. And once they changed it, where we're actually doing weights, on the off days, you can actually put some time and effort into it. Whereas being at work all day, coming back, training for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then having to do your weight training after that, just a lot of guys just did a couple of push-ups and then just went into the showers because they couldn't wait to get home for dinner. So just having that extra time throughout the week with the training a little bit earlier on the Mondays, at 5 o'clock, I think, turned into 4 o'clock the year after, and then 3 o'clock the year after. It just gave us a lot more time to sort of spend a lot more effort on just being a better player, being fitter and stronger. So that really did help.
Do you ever clip Jake if he starts whinging and those stories about having to work till 5 o'clock all day and then train afterwards?
No, it's totally different these days, and we don't really have those conversations. He knows what he has to do. Well, I went from playing to coaching, so I actually coached through the transition into full-time football and became a full-time coach. So I saw it happening, and I think it was sort of I reckon, unfortunately, around when these two were just finishing up around the 95, 96. You could see it was starting. There was talk of the new CBA and all this sort of stuff, and that took a few years to come, but when it did come, it just went bang. And so Ash would have been, your last 4 or 5 years, would have been full-time just about, but still had his business set up and had to do hours there, but you can do it a lot differently, whereas now you get drafted, you're an employee of the club, hopefully for the next 10 or 12 years, and that's it.
There's a classic quote from a guy called David Rees-Jones, who was similar era to myself and Dwayne, and he said, I knew it was time to retire when after a game they gave me a banana instead of a beer. And that was about mid-90s, and that summed it up, I reckon.
And the other thing that changed, I reckon, from 91 to 92 is that I think the match committee and the training staff sort of structured our training throughout the year as well. I think in 91 we just went hell for leather, and by the time we got to the final series we were tired and fatigued, and then having to play 3 weeks out of 3 over East against the good sides. I don't think we're ever going to win that grand final personally, and that was just the feeling, sort of at half time, only being 5 points down. I think it was in the 91. Just the feeling in the rooms that we're gone here.
Well, that prelim, the oval was so heavy. It was out at Waverley, and we played against Geelong. And as Ash said, it was a third week on the road, I think, by the time the GF came around. But the oval was really heavy going, and it was a tough game.
We had to kick into the breeze to win it, into a strong breeze to win it in the last quarter, and we did.
Yeah, so it all added up, those things.
Well, the start of the 92 season was not actually that great, and sitting in 10th at a certain point. Guy McKenna talked about taking a little bit of the tension out of things. Just have a listen to this one.
And they came back, and generally speaking on a Monday we'd have a meeting with the whole group, whereas Mick this wet Monday night, decided, he just wants the 22 from the weekend that played Fitzroy. And he sat them in his office, shut the door. There was his door had to be shut. There was a roller door. It was pouring with rain, Subi, this Monday night. It was coming down sideways, cats and dogs, you name it. And you could still hear Mick just bellowing from the bowels of Subiaco. We could hear him out in the oval because we're out the injured fellas. We're out there, kicking the ball around, trying to get something out of a horrendous night. And the sort of rain started to clear a little bit. And about 45 minutes later, the boys, the 22 that lost to Fitzroy, had come out up the race, tails between their legs, not saying a thing. We'd sort of looked over and you could tell that the mood was a very, very sombre one. And I just said to Pike, he said, mate, we stay out here any longer, mate. We're not catching footies anymore. We're going to catch pneumonia. So I couldn't help myself. So run down the race. Let's go and do some weights. As I'm running down the race, I should say, Timmy Jepp, who was never short of a word, yelled out, there's the Claremont boys getting out of the rain, the soft buggers. And I didn't flinch, just kept running. And in this sort of nice dry dugout with all their wet weather gear on, staying out of the rain, mind you, was Ian Miller, Rob Wiley, Mick was there, physio, our chairman of selectors had turned up in his two-piece suit, looking resplendent. And so I kept running after I sort of got the jibe from Jeppy, having a go at us Claremont boys getting out of the rain, which he was probably on the mark anyway. But anyway, straight into the doctor's room. I picked up this bucket and Pikey was still with me. He said, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, mate, I'm filling up with water. See those blokes up there? They're going to cop that for this. And so I ran straight back up the race. I cocked this bucket of 3/4 full of water. And I said, right, what was that, Jeppy? And before Mick could say, Bluey, there's a clearance in your locker and there's a second one in case you lose the first one, I just sprayed this big bucket of water. And if you've ever done that before when you're throwing your water on your car or stuff, most of it comes out that last little bit. And poor old Spriggy, our chairman of selectors, was caught up in he was the only one without wet weather gear on. Anyway, I hosed them all down with a bucket of water, and before I could hear anything about clearances and transfers, I was straight back down the race, and I thought, this could go either way. I was just trying to lighten up the joint, break the mood up. Hey, it's early in the season. Okay, we've lost to Fitzroy. It's not the end of the world. We've got the rest of the season to look forward to. Anyway, the physio had come back down and he said to me, Bluey, you're a lucky man. I said, why is that? He said, it's the first time I've seen Mick smiling about the first 6 weeks. And I thought, hallelujah, because it could have gone the other way and I could have been marched straight out the door.
He spins a good yarn, doesn't he, Bluey? So, do you guys remember that?
No. Never know he did it.
He just made it up.
I'm still getting over mixed spray for the last 30 minutes.
Probably down in the change room still. So.
Only Bluey can get away with it, I think.
So we had Carl Langdon mowing Mick's lawn and doing the edges, and then Bluey chucking water on it.
Tommy was putting his lights up. They put a hole through his roof.
So that loss to Fitzroy was a turning point from the conversations we've had on this series. A lot of reflection has been around what happened after that. What do you recall from that game and post it?
Well, I watched that one on TV, I think. So
You didn't play either.
I don't think I played.
There's a few missed it. Swimmer didn't play. Bluey didn't play, obviously. Yeah. Ash, maybe Pikey as well.
Watched it on TV. There was a couple of freak goals kicked by them, though. They had a lucky day.
Yeah.
But,
I was in that game and I remember being at half back and it was over in the full play. This over was atrocious. It might have looked good on TV, but it was rubbish. The day was rubbish, cold, wet, which is no excuse. We had plenty of them. But when Doc Wilden socketed this ball from the boundary line, didn't even pick it up, just socketed it, and it went dead straight drop punt. And it went through in the crowd. There was an old wooden stand, and they just went mad. I remember standing there thinking, we're going here. You could just feel it. And it wasn't at the end of the game, it was in the middle of the game or so in the second quarter. I just remember thinking, we are going here. And I think that floated through the whole group, and we just couldn't pick ourselves up. And I think we almost needed that whack across the back of the head to wake us up because we were
we won 2 of our first 6, and we did draw as well up at Carrara against Brisbane, which again I think Brisbane were pretty lowly rated at that time. So win-loss ratio wasn't going that well, but.
And did we play Richmond at the G the week after Fitzroy, or were we back home? Because we only won by a point, I think, or a couple of points.
I think we were back home. But yeah.
You won 10 out of the next 13 games. So it was a significant turnaround.
And I think we lost one of those by 1 point as well. So.
That's right, yeah. I think that was against Collingwood. Yeah. But the turnaround was significant. What was it like in terms of the team gelling at that point? In fact, just have a listen to Peter Matera's got a good comment on this.
Yeah, it was hard because like we had a lot of morning starts, down the beach, early swims, a lot of endurance, but it was more on the field where it just was more gelled. But we came more better off the field as well, because I think the group, if you look at all the guys when we have reunions and when it's like yesterday that we're still playing, because the camaraderie and the friendship is there, and it always has been there. So going into training and that, we train as best mates. We train because we wanted to, get that feedback. We want to get that backup. We want to try and help the back line. We want to try and help the midfield. All that type of stuff, it just came through over a little bit more experience of being belted by Hawthorn and losing that, not losing that desire, just that desire for us to go even further.
Unfortunately, Roo didn't come to the reunion. He talked about reunions there. But what do you guys think about that in terms of that team chemistry? It's a very balanced team if you look at it.
What he said was, well, he wasn't there the other day. I mean, it's perfect too. If he was spent 3 days with us, the last 3 days, you'd understand what the chemistry is still there. But I felt, looking back, I felt like Mick was so determined, even more determined in 92. He wanted to become a premiership coach as well, but he wanted to be the coach of the premiership team. So he was pushing, and I felt there was and it might have been the thing that Bluey did, but he was pushing harder and harder and harder. And it seemed like he was getting angrier and angrier, but it wasn't affecting us. And I think in the end, he just did what he had to do during the week and before the game and passed it over to us. And I think not saying he didn't coach us, but in the end, we had to work it out. And we did. And once we got on a 12-run stretch in 91, so we knew we just had to find that win, and it would come, and we got 5 or 6 or 7 on the trot.
So we're pretty big news back then, in the sense of, the 1990 season were, very successful. 91 won, 17 out of 18 or something like that, and then lost 3 of their last 5 games. So that pre-season, that was sort of between 91 and 92. There's a lot of guys doing marketing stuff, and all of a sudden there's TV appearances, and so I really think there's a bit of the playing group became self-centred, and that was reflected in our performances in the first 6 or 8 weeks. So that's really what I think turned around, as we all realised that we all need each other to end up being successful.
That's what it felt like to me too. Once we clicked, and I think there was a few. Obviously, Boris we always went to Boris and give him a big clip, because he was the wide area and all around about town. So he'd get a clip to remind everyone else, keep your focus on what we're doing here. Forget all that. Go and do that stuff and don't bring it to the club. We're going to train and then we'll go out and play. We play.
And on the field, we had to make sacrifices, of our own performance for the betterment of the team. And Carl was an example of that, where, playing up forward, sometimes he had to dummy lead so that then we could get around him, etc., etc. But yeah.
And that was probably a reflection of...
Worked out well, obviously.
When you get to grand final day, 15 minutes in the second quarter, we're in strife. But and when all these guys said the same, I can remember being out there thinking, not a problem here. Always felt like there was not a problem. Never thought about losing that game. And I think once we got through that start, we got that roll, and I just felt like we're going to go as far as we can this year, and we'll see where it goes. But we just backed each other that much, and we felt comfortable in our own skin in the team.
We also had a lot of luck that year, I think. Finishing 4th, and then I think one or two of the sides above us lost, didn't they? One or two of the sides above us lost, so we got the extra week off, the second chance I think we had. So just the way that the draw was that year as well, having a week off and sitting at home watching Geelong, fight it out against the Bulldogs. That's, you just walk in so fresh, don't you? Even at half time or 3/4 time, you just know there's plenty left in the tank, and they must be getting tired.
So it was a home final. then one trip to Melbourne, then a week off, and then back for the GF. So that compared to some of the stuff that we did back in 1990 and 91. 1990 I think was 6 weeks on the road. Yeah. So
it was a plane strike.
So I was like, wow, how easy is this? Yeah.
When you say there's a bit of luck, we deserved, I think, to have that opportunity and got it.
What about some of the off-field activities? What do you remember about the bonding and the gelling in that way? We've talked about the review nights on this series as well, and some of the interesting stories and sort of costumes and stuff like that. What do you think, Dwayne? What's the memories from that?
Yeah, I think there was more of that back then. Maybe it was easier. I suppose we were a little bit more social. So you'd finish your game and you could have a couple of quieties and, for trips and that type of stuff, you'd do a review and, it doesn't seem that sort of stuff happens anymore. It's just such a professional sort of structure. And so that certainly allows to spend time together and to get to know each other and, feel comfortable with each other. And I suppose those bonds had to be broken and the real team feel sort of started to really come through. And, I think it was a meeting after that Fitzroy game and, I suppose we had to realise and as it just clicked there when you said that, Mark, that everyone there was opportunities coming up. There's the start of, I suppose, Roo and Guy McKenna they're the first bunch of the full-time professionals that were going to come into it. So, but we're all in the mix together and we had to operate as a team. And I think from then on, it's that early low point, we realised we had to move forward as a group and we're only as good as our weakest link.
Yeah, and they always say it was a good blend by that time. You had the desperation of some of the older guys who wanted to win a flag. You had some highly talented younger players. And then you had a really cool group who were sort of between, 22 and 25 years of age and solid guys who had played 100 games and they were very talented as well.
Well, I must say, when Mick walked in, we were going like a busted one in '89, weren't we? I mean, you weren't there, Ash, but he's come in, we've gone bang, straight into a prelim. Yeah. Bang, into a grand final. Then bang.
Sumo had a kick straight, we would have been in the grand final.
But then we're favourites next year, or one of, and we're round 7, we're in strife. So we hadn't dealt with that. Even though we'd lost a grand final, we still hadn't dealt with, we're still in round 7, we've got to get back to that top 3 or 4 or whatever, but we're in all sorts here. So we were learning on the job, really, to try and work out how to get there. So and I think that's where it was like, don't keep whacking us over the head, Mick, because we're trying to guts out here. We've just got to work it out ourselves out there. We'd missed a couple of blokes, a couple of key guys come back in. Some was more important at that team than most people think. I mean, just that figurehead up front. Just when you start the game, you look up there and go, right, Sumo, Louis, Willow.
Had good depth in the squad as well. I think we shouldn't overlook that in the sense of, we batted through probably 26 players because we only played 20. So there's 6 of those guys could have easily slotted into the side without an issue, I reckon.
Well, was Manny Connell there then? Oh, that might have been a bit early, but
yeah. So Matt Clapper went on and played a premiership for Carlton. Danny Laidley was a premiership player at North Melbourne. Paul Pios was a top player. I think Scotty Waters was in that crew.
Barra says he was one of them too.
I hope I haven't left anyone out, but it was a good depth. David Hart and David Hines didn't end up playing in the grand final, so there's 6 just to talk about straight away.
What about those early, football's a bit sanitised now with the crowds and that sort of thing. What about those early days, the parochial crowds in Melbourne, places like Victoria Park, that sort of thing? What was that experience like?
Mate, it was terrible as far as I was concerned. But lucky we had a few of the older crew who came back from the VFL, like John Anir and that, because we were walking off Victoria Park and they just used to have the cage, sort of like the chicken wire, if you like, over the race. And you could feel this liquid coming down. And John, I was about to look up and start abusing some guy, and John said to me, "Don't look up, because every chance it was a liquid that didn't come out of a tap." So so we had to learn a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of abuse,
Apparently at Vic Park they often used to throw coins onto the field, and Dwayne, you've been accused of actually picking up those coins and putting them in your sock. Do you?
I think
there is a true story. It's at Windy Hill, though.
Windy Hill there, but I say it's a safety protocol. I was ahead of my time that someone could have fallen, hit their head on that coin, and I think I flicked it up to Barra because it wasn't a good day that day. I think we only kicked 1 goal. I think Louis got it, and I was coming off of my 3rd or 4th time. Back and then you didn't rotate, so it was coming off because you weren't probably going that well, but Yeah, I flicked it up. I don't think Barry ever gave it back, actually.
Well, but you did love your donuts, your jam donuts after the game. That was one good thing about the suburban grounds. There was always the van out the front. So that's what Fatty's working out. Well, there's $2 on the ground here. So
that'd be a whole bag now, wouldn't it?
It's going to get him a bag of donuts.
I must admit, I still love them. The jam donuts at Ops are pretty good. I think at the grand final last year, when we all got together and went along to it, and I sort of half-time, I thought I got to get a bag of donuts, so I got out, I ran all the way up and ran back and sort of scoffed a couple, but I still, there was a lot of atmosphere, and they're all over you, and it might have been urinating on you or whatever they're throwing over you, but there was atmosphere, and Melbourne was a wonderful place that they actually they'd know you more over there than did here in the early days. You get them on the street, and I think they had a real respect for a player that was playing VFL, and they knew you. So whereas you walk down the street in Perth, and half wouldn't know you. So our obviously supporters over here became very strong after that as we built into 92, and it was wonderful after the grand final. But you go to Melbourne and every Tom, Dick and Harry would know who you are, and they'd give you a bit of lip and whatever. But the grounds are trash. I remember, it was St Kilda's, was that Moorabbin? I reckon it was a paddock one day playing there that was... And through the paddock came our Storman Lockett like a bull coming out.
Great if you're playing the back line though, Fatty.
Did slow it down. Well, I was there.
Close them all down.
It was the facilities too. I mean, I reckon Mick helped.
It's the showers.
Yeah, Mick
after
we come off
freezing, cold showers.
Floorboards with holes in them. We're warming up in these rooms, and there's holes in the floorboards and stuff like that.
All by design.
A lot of it.
I reckon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We felt that was the case, and we, by virtue of getting better as a club and team, and what Fatty just said, we got more recognised. I think Mick had a big say into the AFL and said, we're coming over here and we're going into the showers after a 9 degree or 10 degree day game, and you got one shower head working and it's got 3 bits of water coming out, and it's cold.
We'd actually get on the bus pretty much in our footy gear and go back to the hotel where we stayed to shower, change, then head to the airport to fly home.
It was atrocious,
because it was that bad.
And they would turn the hot water off. And
we had a couple of beers by then to warm us up, didn't we?
Yeah, I'd say so.
And that's where it was AFL in 1990, but it was still the VFL the way they treated us. And I don't know how, I've never spoken to Adelaide boys early on, but fortunately for us guys, we played through those 88, 89, and we knew what was coming, but the new guys didn't. But I think once we started winning a couple of games at Princess Park, we beat them at Windy Hill, we started winning Vic Park. Yeah, the novelty for the opposition went off. It was like, we're doing
also everything. Great playing at those suburban ovals based on my sort of growing up. We'd watch the winners and, you'd sort of know, there'd be one camera on the winners, but you'd know there's grandstand in the corner at Windy Hill, or, at Western Oval, Dougie Hawkins' wing was on the far side. And, we got to experience all those different grounds, which was brilliant.
I remember Mick would be, and particularly when it was a good day, we'd get there, drop our bags, and we'd just go for a walk out. There was rarely, sometimes there was a reserves game, but not all the time. We'd get out in the middle and have a walk. I remember Mick would always walk right down to the goal square just to talk to the opposition. And he'd get a sledge as he's getting closer, but then as he's getting closer to the game, he's coming all the way here. And a couple of us would go down with him, and he'd just talk to him, wave to him, and they just eventually just couldn't resist the fact that we were becoming a good team. And Mick was very calm. He was a calming influence before the game with opposition supporters. They just couldn't do anything else but respect us. So Mick could just go down and walk around and he'd talk to them. And then the opposition fan club. So it's quite funny.
The finals, I want to talk a little bit about, well, at least your memories of the first two finals. You missed the second one, obviously, but the Hawthorn game was significant because obviously losing the grand final the year before, and it was almost like a bogey team. What was the memories of that game, Ash?
Well, I think if you talk to most people, they tend to think it was the best game that they've ever seen. Very close, play a very good football on a beautiful day. I think in Perth on a nice oval. It would have been pretty good for the crowd, I would have thought. But just sort of getting over that over Hawthorn, after losing to them, I think twice in the final series the year before, was really the moment where I think we believed that we could win it.
Yeah, I felt the same. It was funny just catching up with the guys on the weekend, and even Mick was in the conversation. We felt that the Hawthorn game was the hardest game. One of the hardest games we played in that decade, because they seemingly had it on us from the finals the year before. They came out of nowhere. We'd beaten them well in 91, and they came over to Perth and got us, and that rocked us a bit. But the day we played them in 91 was still a very good game. I think we only lost by a couple of goals. So then the next game, the next year was. I remember thinking 10 minutes ago, we just can't get rid of these blokes. We're just in front, then they'd get one, and then we get one. And so it was up 12 or 13 points, I think, in the end. But I remember the siren going, I think, wow, thank God for that.
Pretty much, it must have been an elimination final, I think. It was a top 6, and we were, fourth. So to think that we might have gone out in the first final after being so good in 90 and 91, oh wow, that would have been just devastating.
Would have been heartbreaking, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And it was a real, thank God for that moment when the siren went.
It was tight.
Yeah,
Through the last
it was a hard
quarter,
game of footy.
Tight.
Down a three-quarter time. Yeah.
Because I did my hammy midway through the last quarter, and then Ash must have been playing forwards, so I was.
I went to full back.
Yeah, I was waving at him to get down back, and I just exited. So.
And Dunstall had an unbelievable game, for memory.
Yeah.
I played on him most of the time. I'll take the heat off Ash there. He was only on him for 15 minutes. Yeah. I think that day he might have had 7 kicks and kicked 6 goals, 1 or something like that. You'd get him to the boundaries, you'd do all you could working the angles. But yeah, he's a great player. Really enjoyed playing on him.
What about the lead into the grand final? What did you remember this year compared to 91?
Oh, it was completely different, wasn't it? Well, first of all, we went to the parade. We went over a day early just to get into it a little bit and just relax. And then we trained at the MCG. That was probably pretty important for most because we didn't play much of the MCG. So training at the MCG and just seeing which way the wind goes and a few shots on goal and all that sort of stuff was really important. And then the parade, just sort of getting amongst it and realising how important it is. How much the Melbourneites, the Melbourneians love their footy, and that just sort of fired us up, I think.
And there's a lot of support from Western Australia. How many people had actually made the effort to go over and encourage us during the parade. But the MCG was important too, wasn't
Absolutely.
it? Like even the width of the ground. That's how much we didn't play on it. You had to really understand how wide it was, make sure you don't get lost. And
Now there's a specific oval out here for the players to train on it every time.
Play next week.
beats the back of Guildford.
I felt like Friday night. I reckon Friday was just so important that we actually, and just seeing how many people from Perth were there as we just, cruising on the back of the car through the streets. And to me it was like, as I said before, it happened real quick. Prelim, grand final, but here we are back 3rd year in. We're in the grand final again, and we're over there. We've had a good night's sleep Thursday. Went and had a run in the morning at the G, and we're on the cars. And you're looking around, seeing family and mates and that. And by the time you got to the end, you thought, geez, there's a lot of people over here. And it just felt more real to me. And I reckon by Friday night, we all had a team meeting and put our heads on the pillow. I reckon everyone was feeling pretty comfortable that we're going to have a real red hot shot at this. And that's why I figured 20 minutes in the second quarter, there just wasn't any alarm bells going off. We just felt like we were right in it. And then that last 5 minutes, we proved it. We just clawed our way back in, and I don't know who it was, and it might have been you or Jacko. We walked down the race and said, they've just thrown everything at us, boys, and we're right with them. And I can never forget that comment. I don't even know who it was.
It was me, Matty.
But it was an appropriate comment, and it just floated through the room.
Yeah.
And we all just went down and calmed down and just sat down. Right, we're right in.
We've got a clip from Bluey here. We're going to play you around the preparations going into the grand final in the change rooms beforehand.
Again, I think from the top down, I mean, Mick and the assistants, there was no over-coaching, if you know what I mean. There was just, it's another day. I mean, obviously there's a massive thing at the end of it, but, he just wanted to make sure everyone got into their normal routine as quick as they possibly could. And when I say a senior player at that stage, but certainly, playing in 91 and all that sort of stuff, my only mind, and again, all I can remember back was just thinking, well, if someone's 2 up or someone's 2 down, I need to get them up to that level, but I can't honestly say that was never a need for me to do. You just walk around and do, as you say, everyone was different pre-match. Some like to kick, some like to handball, some like to do it for a minute, some like to do it for 15 minutes. Maney used to get in the showers and do his, jiu-jitsu or whatever it was and do the, that was him pumping it up, so you have a giggle and a laugh at him as you walk past him and all that sort of stuff. So when he was doing that, that was calming for me because I knew Maney was on. It was more just walking around and looking at each other in the eye, just going, yep, little gentle nod and saying, yep, we're on here. let's get into it.
What do you remember about the pre-grand final?
Yeah, I agree. I think we were more settled and probably matured as a group and individually. And yeah, I think it was an easier run once we got over Hawthorn. I think we felt better in ourselves, more confident, and felt like it wasn't destiny, but it was on the right track. And then I suppose the walk down to the ground, through the crowd and sort of copying a little bit, but giving a little bit back, or a couple of them like Boris and that. Taking a bit of bait, but giving a bit back, and then getting the rooms. And yeah, I think it was, like Bluey said, a bit business-like. We're there, we knew what we had to do, and we'd sort of been through it the year before. And I think a massive thing, being back at MCG, Waverley to me wasn't a real grand final and hadn't worked for us, but back at the home and footy, and it just felt like a big occasion, and the support we had, etc. Just it all just came together and gelled.
I think one of the important things Bluey said there was that, going back to what I said before, I think those first 7 weeks, I think the coaches were trying to push us a bit too hard and try and do things differently, because we couldn't get that win and we were drawn with bottom teams and lost to Fitzroy, and I thought there was too much push. But in the end, if there was, like Bluey just said, we just went business as usual. Once we got to that point in the season, round 8, 9, 10, and found our thing, I think it was like, you guys coach us, but when we're out there, just let us go. We'll work it out. We know we're good enough we've been right up here before, so we'll work it out. By that stage of the year, we'd done the Friday, we'd felt confident. There was nothing more Mick could do for us. He just had to put the team up and just, give us a bit of a last-minute rah-rah. But
there was no anxiety.
No,
at half-time.
That was
a really important thing. Yeah. The player group felt comfortable and confident where we were at, although we were down on the scoreboard. And I think the coaching group also didn't show any anxiety either. So
no overreacting. There was none of that. The whole day just went to, not perfectly to script, because we were in a bit of trouble there, but we just stuck to what we knew we had to do, and we'd done it for the best part of the last 12 or 14 weeks, with a couple of minor hiccups in there. But
I think we're also desperate not to be a side that's going to win and lose 2 grand finals in a row. I mean, and you're a timeline, I guess, when you've got a good squad, it doesn't last forever. So to go in and lose 2 grand finals in a row wasn't really an option for us. We didn't see it as an option anyway. So I think everyone was so keen and so desperate to win that we got over the top.
What about superstitions, fellas? Anyone here have any sort of pre-game superstitions at all?
Not big time superstitions. Like, certainly followed a sort of bit of a procedure and that, and liked my bag next to my locker in a certain way, and when you got strapped or you got massaged and who was in front of you, and but yeah, I don't know. I don't remember anyone too big.
Dwayne, apparently you did have one. Let's have a listen to Don Pike.
Dwayne Lamb had this superstition about making a donation to charity before he played in big games or something, and I remember him forgetting to do it, and he ran off to the toilet block to grab a phone and donate money to somewhere. I'm pretty sure that's what he said. It was like, anyway, it was one of those weird superstitions he had, and he was looking for someone who could borrow a phone so he could go and donate $50 to somewhere, because he thought that was his lucky break.
I kept that from you blokes. I was just giving away. I never kept any of my salary at all. It was all given to charity.
Were they the coins you found in the over? You were
I felt bad, so I distributed them. But there's karma. I suppose you give a bit to get a bit to come back the other way. So could possibly have been true, but yeah. Memory sort of fails me a little bit there, but if you blokes want to chip in and sort of give some of that back, it certainly worked.
Tommy he'd be up in the bucket on the way up the race, wouldn't he? He'd get so worked up, he'd just walk past, about to run up, and he'd just into the bucket.
Just a vomit. Yeah.
Just a quick vomit.
Very nervous.
Yeah.
Very nervous.
And you wouldn't know it, yeah.
But I think the whole team was nervous early, the way that we played a little bit. We went, after beating Geelong easily in the second semi and then having the week off, we probably went in as favourites, I would have thought. And to be down by a reasonable amount halfway through the second quarter, we just weren't playing well, were we? But to our credit, we came back.
Well, the back line was under pressure, and you had Bill Brownless, who was having a really good season as well. What was it like playing on him that day?
Well, it's it's a grand final. It's always sort of nerve-wracking, but I guess when you're the last line of defence, and Mucky knows too well that if you lose that contest, there's a chance it's a goal. So there's probably a little bit of extra pressure down there.
But you absorbed it pretty well. I mean, there was opportunities. If you look back at the game in that first half, they probably could have got a few more goals. Was that something that you noticed?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, they could have had us 5-6, and that outside 30 points. When you see teams lose, get in front by 30, don't lose. But back then, if they got 30 plus on us, we might have been a bit of strife. But it's funny. 2 years later, at 94, I remember going at 3/4 time, looking up, thinking, it was 6 up here. Thinking, if there's one team that can do that, it's this mob. So that's what you'd think of against Geelong, because they're good midfielders and they had a powerful forward line with, Stone and Brownless and the great one up there. So, but anyway, we hung in there.
We were probably lucky we got those. Tony Evans kicked those couple, didn't he? Late in the second quarter, because it's a big difference, 26 points to 13 or whatever it was. I
was on Riccardi early and he snapped one from the pocket. I said, oh, great, that's a good start. And it was just out of his backside. I thought, I'm off to a real beauty here. And then about 10 minutes later, I've got about to take off because I seen Jacko coming across. He's about to crush this ball. And he went to mark it. And I've left Riccardi back there. I think it was Stoneham and I just give him a big hooks and punch. Anyway, he's kicked it straight over my head to Riccardi and I'm on the mark. He's on the left foot of his pocket. He kicked it, turned around. I started running towards the bench, thinking, I'm going here. And it just moved the opposite way and hit the post.
It was the bench.
I'm off. I'm out of here.
Sort of rotation.
In those days,
for a while.
Mick started rotations with me back in the day, well before anyone thought about it. And I'm thinking, I'm going here too in the first 20. And it just moved and hit the post and it just thought, okay, right, start moving. I actually started getting the ball and getting my hands on it. And then Stoneham came through and I tried to chase him down, but he'd gone and kicked one. And it was funny. It was a hectic sort of first quarter.
It was hectic.
It was real hectic.
It's a big occasion. I remember just the nerves getting out there and just the crowd just felt bigger and it felt like you were in a goldfish bowl and they could reach out and touch you. And
10 minutes in, I thought, this ball's moving quick, things are going on, and then Pikey's knocked out and didn't have time to think we're in danger. Just hang in. Just got to get to quarter time and reassess.
Well, I don't think a lot of us have watched the game on replay too often. No, but just recently seeing some of the clips and that, it was brutal. Really hard physical football, wasn't it? Crashing and bashing.
Jobby and Jacko went and recalled it last week.
Oh yeah.
And Jacko's take on the game now is just wow. He was talking a bit about when Mitch White came on at centre forward. He didn't think that Geelong had planned for that because Mitch is a different type of player and he started just moving a bit and creating a few different things they weren't ready for. And that was, through Pikey coming off. And so I've never even thought about that, that little thing that could happen. That it happened because Pikey got knocked out and we had to shuffle a bit, that he didn't think that they were ready for Mitch White coming on so early in the game.
There was many iconic moments in the game, Matera's goal and that sort of thing, but one that was really, really popular as well among the fans was your rundown of Robert Scott. And he was one of the fastest players on Geelong's team. Do you recall that tackle?
Well, he's probably the fastest. And the word was that he caught Pete Matera, so it was a challenge and I chased him and I joked that he deviated and I nearly ran past him. And but I stayed on his...
Yes, it was a joke, yes.
Yeah, it was a joke. But whether he was putting a bounce down or whatever, but maybe it was a little bit of luck, but getting to him and he was under more pressure to hold on to the ball and I sort of hung in there. But it was a wonderful memory and like Monk says, I probably have never really watched a replay. I suppose if I was Pete Matera, probably, I reckon Ruse watched it a few times, kicking 5 off a wing. And
from a teammate's point of view, I reckon it was just so inspirational what Fatty did. Not renowned for his speed, but determination and his will to catch that guy. I reckon it really had a big impact on across the field.
Well, you just look at it, but Rue kicked the goal in the second quarter. I've been telling people for 30 years, don't worry about the other one, start of the third quarter. Have a look at the one in the second, because we were in deep trouble. And there was just a pack about 60 metres out from goal and half-back flank. He's sort of gone over it. He's reached in, grabbed the ball out, sidestepped the bloke, run to 55 on the run and kicked it. And because we were in front, it was just a game. I was up the other end thinking, Man, he's just pulled that out of the pack and gone and kicked it on the run.
It was like a schoolyard scene. There's the footy. I want to go kick. So
it was just arms and legs everywhere. He's just gone in and picked it, taken one bounce, sidestep and kicked it. And then he's done the other great goal in the third quarter. I thought, that's just a great goal. We actually needed that goal right there and then. But no one's ever talked about that goal. I thought that was a really important goal. But the way he did it was just... It's like
all on his own too.
It was just like he owned it, I'm just going to go and do this.
Do you remember at halftime, Mikey, the tussle you got into with Mark Bester? There's a bit of airtime if you look at halftime. Now, whether or not that's East Fremantle, South Fremantle, or was it in the heat of the moment there?
Well, he whacked him.
I might have given him a little tickle in the third quarter.
It's just out of camera angle, but you can see it comes to about there and then he goes out of camera angle. And then someone in the commentary box goes, Besto's down.
Mick got me riled up a bit at a certain time during the game, so and I wasn't having a big influence. So yeah, I get on. I see Mark Besto now, and we get on just fine. So I'm glad it's all been sorted out. It wasn't brutal in the sense of that collision, but...
he would have done time these days. It would have been 2 to 4. Intentional, high contact.
I'm trying to smooth it over.
He was having a bad day anyway, wasn't he?
Well, he was, Toby, yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing, I reckon. The other Geelong had such a sensational side too. The matchups on you, when Millie talks about, the game's changed, but the lineup 1 against 1 around the ground was just incredible when you look back and think who was on who and... champions against champion, if you like.
Another iconic moment was Woosha headbutt and Buddha's thigh. No one ever talked about that, but he actually dived across his leg and forced him into a cork. So Buddha Hocking couldn't really get his game going after that. It was only because Woosha just threw his body at him at one point and his head hit him right in the... His head actually corked his thigh. Wow. And that slowed him down. I think he kicked left foot for the rest of the day, I reckon.
Yeah.
Buddha Hocking.
And limped around.
And it was just because Woosha just threw himself at it and...
Both those guys still got a few touches though. If you look at it,
Yeah, he wasn't his damage.
Probably
himself.
not their normal 30 or whatever, but they still had a bit of ball.
What about the celebrations? It was an amazing moment, the siren and what you'd done for the state of football in WA. Do you remember the moment the siren went off and just being around your teammates?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, the last quarter was pretty harrowing, to be honest. Once we were 5 up, I was just watching the clock going, hurry up. Just, you don't want to lose the moment. I felt a lot better. We were 80 points up, 94, but this last 5 minutes, I was just going, blow the siren, will you? I knew it was funny in the next couple of years, and when I was retiring, I always thought that game would become more and more significant in our lives later on. And here we are 30 years later, and it's talked about as that game, we're still getting rolled out around the oval and stuff like that. It's become one of the most significant games in the AFL history, I think.
Yeah, it's great relief that achieved my ultimate goal and why I played footy, and that was to win flags. And
you gave the big thumbs up down the barrel. Do you remember that, when you got your medallion?
Yeah, I actually did that for a reason, because my younger brother couldn't get over to the game. And I said to him before I left, I said, when I get up there, I'll give you the thumbs up. And half forgot about it, but once I got up there, I looked down, the barrel was there. And that was to Michael Brennan, who was at the Charles Hotel with all his mates. So he was pretty happy. He thought he was important. Yeah, it was brilliant.
Fatty, do you remember a cab charge that you might not have paid the night of the grand final? This was...
I'm worried about this.
Cab charge. Someone else... wow. Yeah, I'm not sure what sort of nick I was into. I had to get in pretty quickly. I think it was...
That was the night that you realised that the revolving door actually shut at midnight.
Well, something like that, but I had to get in.
Tried to walk through it at 5 a.m. and it didn't move.
It was well after.
You were concerned getting into the hotel and the cab charge might have had to be covered by maybe a club official or something like that. Is that?
I think someone came to my assistance and then probably gave some assistance to get to the room, and then I had to get re-assisted because I think I might have gone to the wrong one. But I think it all partakes to bumping into... Chris Mainwaring sort of late in the evening, probably should have been heading back home, but
early morning.
Bumped in early morning, and I think he latched on, and it probably.
One thing I remember was mentioned over the weekend, but because we were staying cross road from the MCG, And those days you never got the opportunity to go back on the ground after your lap of honour, etc. But I was rooming next to Muddy, and my wife was back in Perth because she was heavily pregnant with our daughter. And I remember we sat, yourself and me, we just sat in the hotel room, the lights, looking back at the MCG, the lights were still on. And for me, that was just a surreal moment that, you know, we've done it. How good's this?
I always found that was when you were on your own or with the boys. So I think I had a drink on the Saturday night. I had my folks and I just wanted to be in the moment. So then get back and we went to the Subi Oval and there's people everywhere. And then I think we had to stay there an hour or so. We went upstairs, had something to eat. But I think everyone was just keen to go, get home, jump in your own shower and just sit back and have a think. And then we went and had a beer Sunday night. It's probably every Monday, the last game of the year, and for us when we won the flags, we all go to Steve's Hotel and pretty much the pub shut because Murray McHenry owned it. It was just the players, girls and all the staff. And we sat there, we drink all day, but just to be in there with all the guys in, that's when you sit back and go, far out, 2 days on, we've done it. And you'd actually sit and enjoy without people around. And,
Yeah, that's the best time, isn't it?
yeah, and not being selfish.
You know, just us.
Just us, without being selfish, you know. The crowd and the fans loved it, loved being a part of it, but just to get the team and the girls, and, you know, that's some of them start having kids, and then after lunch, sort of late the arvo, all the staff come down, the trainers, and bring their part. It's just great. You just sit around till 9 or 10 o'clock that night even, and it's pretty loose late on at night, but it's just great. It's just us. And that's when you really enjoyed it.
It was a relaxation.
Yeah.
Yeah, take it deep. You're not on edge about, you know, whether you had to speak to the media or you had to, you know, sign autographs or whatever. It was just, wow, how good's this?
Job's done.
We've achieved it. And everyone has got their own personality, as you've touched on before. You're just sort of looking around the beer garden there, and there's blokes, you know, whether you've got kids on your lap or, you know, you're young and doing whatever you wanted to do, sort of thing. It was, I reckon it was really great moments, great memories.
The security conveyor belt. Vanny, do you remember that one?
Dementia again, plead the fifth. Well, I'm not sure if I had the Premiership Cup, probably not, I'd say, but maybe I was ahead of my time. I just wanted to check the body out. It was a cheap X-ray, but I did go through it on that occasion, and again, I'll blame Maney. There was wonderful memories, but I've lived through it and got out of it, and it's probably, I won't go into any others on that day on the way, but probably cooked me I was the oldest probably bloke out there and went a bit too hard, too early, but great memories and little stories.
Reflecting back on the big achievement, this is kind of the last question. You spoke about it briefly, 30 years down the track, and some of you have stayed involved in football, some of you haven't, but what's kind of the overall sort of feeling now, 30 years later, looking back on something that really had such a massive impact on football and the state?
To me, it feels profound, and as said, just thinking back, that went to a true AFL, I suppose. It was the first one outside of the Victoria, so it was extremely memorable. And I think after the game, just as you said, the amount of people from WA had come out for the game, and the victory lap stopping in front of them, and they're all down one end generally, and just seeing the enjoyment that you brought to so many sort of West Australians and West Australians over there, the ones that come over, and then when we got back, it just made you feel like we had achieved something that won't get done again, and brought so much joy to more than just ourselves. We got joy out of it, and the people around us, and but the West Australians, it was wonderful that everyone just dropped everything and just watched that game that day.
A lot of people know what they were doing, on that day, whether they were at a wedding and had to duck out the back and listen on the radio, or where they were, and etc. And so they always know where they were for the 1992 grand final.
Missing the grand final for a wedding would have been absolutely terrible, wouldn't it? I mean, it was an incredible moment for anyone that was a fan. And
I don't think I certainly didn't realise how it would become such an iconic West Australian, or memory of West Australian sport. Not just for the West Coast Eagles Football Club, but also for the whole of Western Australia.
On the back of that, I eventually made it home at some point during the week and went and saw Mum and Dad. I walked in, the old man's there having a beer with a couple of his mates who had grown up watching Victoria smash every state team in WA, and they actually said, you don't know how significant that win is and how important it is to us old blokes who just hated seeing Victoria beat us all the time. It felt like finally we got them, even though it was a club game. But prior to that was just the state rivalries, and they were quite dominant. They won, we ended up winning 79. But for people who didn't even follow West Coast, they'd just come through that era to actually finally knock them off and say, all right, we've got you. It was significant. I found that comment very significant. So, but if you ask us where the game is, I think it's right where I thought it would have been 20 years ago or 15 years ago when we retired or whatever it was. I thought this game was never going to go away. It was always going to be super important.
Well, boys, it must have been a pretty life-changing experience winning that 1992 grand final and coming back to Perth with all the stardom that followed. Let's have a listen to some of the experiences of your teammates.
Yeah, well, about 4 days later, I'd seen a clip of grand final day and what the streets were like in Perth. So, when I saw that, I thought, oh, well, sort of the whole place has stood still for the game. And, when we flew back, we were treated like gods, actually. So it was an interesting time.
Wherever you went, I remember driving down south for a holiday, and I was driving along in my car, and I was doing, I don't know, it was 110, and I was doing about 120k zone or whatever. And in about a space of 50, 60 k's, I got picked up with the coppers 3 times, and every one of them, I got autograph, and they let me off 3 times. They said, oh, Roo, I don't know where you going. I said, I need a photo. So he reached in. Two of them had a photo with me, and then 3 autographs. And then they just said, awesome game, I said, just take it easy, don't kill yourself. Where you going? I said, I'm going down south. All right, no worries. Good luck next year, darling. And I drove off. Well, that's 3 in a row. I couldn't believe it. 3 of them let me off. But it was just one of those things. It was just, they just wanted the pieces. I used to have autograph sessions, and there's, at chemists and all these around Perth, and people were just lined up out the door, you think you're going there for a half an hour autograph session, you're there for an hour and a half because it's just crazy.
Any life-changing kind of moments?
On the phone to the next cop, bloody Matera's in a bloody...
Pull him over, we'll get an autograph. No, nothing like that for me. I did. As I said before, I always thought this game would end up where it is, and it's not going to stop. And it's been rolling along until finally, here's the 30 years. But
you're always introduced as premiership players. That's something that a lot of great players never get to be introduced as, and it's something that stays with you forever.
I can't. It's hard to answer that question because I can't answer it from the other side, and don't want to be disrespectful of those guys who didn't have one or don't have one. But I quite often think, how would my life be if we didn't?
I do reflect on the Geelong boys a bit, in the sense that I think they lost 4 in the end. I think, seriously, it'd actually be really hard to deal with emotionally, Yeah.
And how the club has been built from those years to now, and you walk through here and you see this massive building and this fantastic state-of-the-art facility, and the club has over 100,000 members and that sort of thing. Are you proud of what you've done to set the club up for the success that it had in the future?
Yeah, I think it really, you feel a lot of pride in that start. It was hard, when we first got together and bonded.
We played in the first game together, in '87. So.
And then sort of building the relationships, falling a few times and getting across the line there in a short period of time. And you probably didn't think how significant it was. It was massive, but I suppose it's when you're around, so many people do recall it and, talk about how wonderful it was. And you look at the club, it's been a wonderful club, and you always feel wonderful coming back into it. And we've always been made welcome to be around the place. And we've had good, but you'd like to think that was the springboard to start it all off.
It's funny, people think we just roll up when we want to around here, but it's not the case. I mean, particularly with me, I've had 2 boys here, now I've got Jake. But we don't come out here that much. I see how big the club is, it's great, but we don't actually spend a whole lot of time at the club. you know, in all seriousness,
Well, people move on, don't they?
yeah. So we've got our own lives, and people think we're just there all the time. We're just not.
Now, I suppose it's because it's like a business.
Yeah.
They're just during the day, so you wouldn't know what time you could roll up. In the old day, you'd go to Subi Oval on a Tuesday night at 5:30, and you'd know the team would be training. And Thursday night, now it's done by 5:30. I suppose they're all home and like we're doing. But it's
And we have functions, and we all just go, but it's not always rarely here. In fact, that's the first function I've been to here when we had dinner the other night. But I think the conjure is Nizzy. So he was the footy manager and he's been the CEO. So he knows how significant and important that team was to the club. It is what it is. We've done our bit. We've been out for ages and we get on with our lives. But it's like the Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. But it's always like that for us. But we actually love our own functions like the race day and that, and getting the girls involved. We all get on like a house on fire. But we don't ring each other every week either. It's just that when we get together.
Social media's been good.
Yeah.
Even us old fellas, you know, on the WhatsApp that we've created, it's been very good to make sure we're still communicating and make sure everyone's going okay.
Well, gentlemen, thanks very much for your time and being a part of this podcast. This has been the last episode of History Makers, the documentary series which went behind the scenes of the 1992 Premiership season. We hope you've enjoyed it, and if you want to catch up on previous episodes, you can download the podcast on Spotify or other podcast apps. And for more 1992 content, you can go to westcoasteagles.com.au.